Parsha, and we mentioned the last few days, the Parsha, this week's Parsha, Parshas Matos Massei, has in it, Parshas Massei, the Pasuk, V'rashtem es ha'aretz v'shaftem ba, you shall conquer the land and settle the land. The Ramban, Nachmanides, in his commentary on Rambam, Maimonides, Sefer Mitzvos, 613 mitzvahs, that's set in stone. It's a Gemara in Matos. Torah tziva lanu Moshe merosha kilas Yaakov. Moshe commanded us a Torah. If you do your math, this math I actually can do. I can't do inclines. Dr. Sabbath can do that. I can't do that. But actually basic four-function math I can, Baruch Hashem, do. Torah. The gematria of Torah is 611, Taf is 400, Vav is 6, Reish is 200, Hey is 5. You put that together, you have 611. Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Moshe commanded me 611, and I heard directly from God at Har Sinai, not through Moshe. I heard 611 mitzvahs through Moshe. Two, the first two commandments, I am your God, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and thou shalt not worship another God other than me. Lo yeh locha Elohim achem al panai. Those first two of the Ten Commandments, God, we heard it directly from God at Har Sinai. 611, Torah tziva lanu Moshe. 2 from the Rebbeinu Shalom, 613. The Gemara says we have 613 mitzvahs. How you count those 613 mitzvahs is a question amongst the Rishonim. Machlekes, there are all kinds of sforim. There's the Sefer Rambam, Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol. There's Nachmanides. There's the Sefer HaChinuch, the famous Sefer HaChinuch. All these sforim are trying to get to the number 613. It's not that easy. And there's a machlokes how you count the 613. So I give the example. Parshas Kedoshim begins with a commandment, Kadoshim to you, thou shalt be holy. Is that one of the 613 mitzvahs? It's a general proposition. Thou shalt be holy. How? By doing the mitzvahs. Eat matzah, fast Yom Kippur, keep Shabbos, keep Taras HaMishpacha, you'll be holy. So it's not one of the 613 mitzvahs. It's just a general statement from God, be holy by doing the mitzvahs. So it's not one of the 613 mitzvahs. All the Shittas hold that Kedoshim to you is a specific mitzvah. You are to be holy. How? That's a discussion that they have about how you makayim the mitzvah of Kedoshim to you. But now look what happens. I must stick to 613. So if I don't count Kedoshim to you as one of the 613, let's start with the other side. One person counts 613 and he includes Kedoshim to you and he has 613. That person comes to me and says, here's the 613. And I say to him, 613, nothing doing. Kedoshim to you is a general proposition statement. It's not one of the 613 mitzvahs. It just says, if you eat matzah, you will be holy. If you keep Pesach, you'll be holy. But it's not one of the 613. So the other person says to me, okay, you only have 612 now. We'll begin with 613. So I go through the Torah and I find a mitzvah that he didn't include and he thought was only a statement and I think is actually a mitzvah. I'll give you an example of such a statement. There's a machlokes in Masechta Sotah Daf Gimel Amud Aleph between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. 3 mitzvahs, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel disagree about how to count the 613. Particularly 3 mitzvahs, I'll give you an example. La'olam bahem ta'avodu. There's a pasuk in the Torah that says if you purchase an Eved Kanani, if you purchase a Canaanite slave, that la'olam bahem ta'avodu, you're never allowed to free him. This is probably a politically incorrect subject to discuss today, slavery and freedom of slavery, etc. But we are not politically correct. We are not PCs. We are TCs. We are Torah correct. We're not interested in PCs. We're TCs. Okay, so there's halacha in the Torah. Yes, no, that's the halacha in the Torah. There's such a thing as an Eved Kanani. You purchase a Canaanite slave. It says, L'olam behem ta'avodu, and you shall work them forever, meaning you're never allowed to free a Canaanite slave. You're not allowed to free him. Is that one of the 613 mitzvahs? If a person frees an Eved Kanani, did he violate one of the 613 mitzvahs? Was this a statement from the Rebbeinu Shalom, I don't want you to free a Canaanite slave? Or is he telling you it's a mitzvah? Keep him enslaved forever. That's a machlokes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel, whether it's a mitzvah. Another example in Sota Daf Gimel, it says by a Kohen, lo yitama. It says that a Kohen who's not allowed to be matame to a mace, Kohen Hedyot, says that there are the relatives that he can be matame to, and it says to his sister who is not married, lo yitama, to her he shall become tameh, lo yitama. What does that pasuk mean? Does it mean that the God is giving the Kohen permission? If you want to be matame to your sister, you can be matame to her. I'm telling you, you can't be matame to anyone else, but to the following people, you're permitted to be matame. You don't want to, you don't have to. Or does lo yitama mean, and to her you shall become tameh? You're a Kohen, and although you can't defile yourself in tumah with the dead body of other people, I am telling you as one of the 613 mitzvahs, you shall become tameh to your sister who's not married. There are two ways to read the pasuk, lo yitama. So it's machlekes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel whether these kind of psukim are mitzvahs, and there's three machlekes there. So at any rate, you have this problem. Tosfos talks about it there in Sota. If you take out three verses and say that they're just permission, for example, lo yitama, if you want to, you can become tameh to the sister, but you don't have to. Well, if I say it's just permission but not a mitzvah, I only have 612. Where's 613? This is one of the discussions in Masech Sota, Daf Gimel, and Tosfos discusses this issue in Sota. The 613 number is fixed in stone. The Rambam wrote a Sefer HaMitzvahs. He wrote a Sefer HaMitzvahs and he counts the 613 mitzvahs. It's the first volume of any set of Rambam, has the Rambam's counting of 613 mitzvahs. The Ramban Nachmanides wrote a commentary, so to speak, on Maimonides. And at different points, the Ramban says, this pasuk that the Ramban quotes as a mitzvah, it is not a mitzvah. It's a statement. It's a permission. It's not a mitzvah. Okay, the Ramban says, I just pulled out one, now I only have 612. I'm going to put in the following pasuk, so you have 613. And then the Nachmanides continues and says, I'm going to take this one out. And he says, I'm going to put this one in. And so you're going to end up with 613. In the calculation of these mitzvahs, in his Sefer HaMitzvos, the Rambam does not count conquering and living in Eretz Yisrael as one of the 613 mitzvahs. In the Sefer HaMitzvos, in the counting of mitzvahs. Nachmanides points this out and says, I'm pulling out one of the Rambam's mitzvahs, which I don't believe is a mitzvah, it's just a statement, and I'm putting in its place the mitzvah to conquer and live in Eretz Yisrael. And how do I know that it's a mitzvah to conquer in Eretz Yisrael? Because the pasuk in this week's Parshas in Massei, God said, you shall conquer the land, but you shall settle there. That's not a good idea, the Ramban says. That's a biblical commandment to conquer the land and settle the land. As we saw, the Ramban says, this mitzvah includes never allowing. It has nothing to do with the Beis HaMikdash. Even if there's no Beis HaMikdash, there's a mitzvah that the Jewish people should have sovereignty over the entire biblical borders of Eretz Yisrael. Shalom nazvena biyad ha'umas. We're never permitted to allow other nations to rule any part of the borders of Eretz Yisrael. And also, we don't leave it lishmama. We don't leave it desolate. We make Eretz Yisrael beautiful and settled. We said we'd come back to this mitzvah next week. The Rambam does not count it as one of the 613 mitzvahs, but it has nothing to do with the halacha. We'll deal with this next week, why he didn't count it as one of the 613 mitzvahs, because if you go into the Rambam's halacha sefer, the Rambam wrote numerous books. He wrote the Moreh Nevuchim, he wrote a Pirush HaMishnayos, he wrote Sefer HaMitzvahs, where he counts 613, and then he wrote the famous Yad HaHazakah, the 14 books of halacha. In the books of halacha, there's a subject called Malachim. And in the book of Malachim, the subject of Malachim, he has all the rules of Eretz Yisrael. Every single rule is there, Kemat, quoted from the Gemara in Ksubis. A person must live in Eretz Yisrael. You're not allowed to live in Chutz La'aretz. You're not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael to go to Chutz La'aretz except for specific reasons. A person should live in Eretz Yisrael even if the city is majority Goyim, rather than live in Chutz La'aretz in a city that's majority Yidden. And he quotes all these Gemaras. So why did he count it as a mitzvah? We'll be there to talk about that next week. As we continue the tikkun of the Chet HaMeraglim, we quote Rav Kook. Rav Kook says that we should never forget that Tisha B'Av is the day the 5 things happen for which we fast. 2 of those 5 things are the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, 2 of the 5 events. But the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed on Tisha B'Av because it's a Yom Muchen L'Puranos. It's a day where bad things happen to Jewish people. Why do bad things happen to Jewish people on Tisha B'Av? The Gemara in Tainus and Daf Chof tells us why. Because the Chet HaMeraglim happened on Tisha B'Av. On the night of Tisha B'Av, the Jewish people were persuaded by the Meraglim not to go to Eretz Yisrael. They were crying in their tents, we don't want to go, we don't want to go, we don't want to go. And the Gemara tells us, the Rebbeinu Shalom said, I want to give you a wonderful gift to Eretz Yisrael. You're crying, you don't want the gift? I'll give you plenty of reasons to cry on this very evening. And Tisha B'Av in the future became a night of crying for Klal Yisrael. The root of Tisha B'Av is the Chet HaMeraglim. And therefore, Rav Kook says we should never lose sight of this during the 3 weeks. And we should work on, that's very important. The second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of Sinas Chinam, and we're working to correct the Sinas Chinam. Or we should be working on correcting the Sinas Chinam. But at the same time, we need to remember the whole root of this thing is Lashon Hara Eretz Yisrael v'Chet HaMeraglim, which occurred on Tisha B'Av. And so each day, beginning right after Shivat Tammuz, we've been talking about Eretz Yisrael. We'll continue Blinei the next week, and we'll go into the Shitas Rambam. Why didn't the Rambam make it one of the 613 mitzvahs if it's in the Sefer Halacha, he says you have to live in Eretz Yisrael? I hope that a handout was distributed this morning. The first page of the handout is a Mishnah in Masechta Nazir. This Mishnah is just an example of a halacha. Chazal will goizer tuma al eretz ha'amim. Chazal said that any place that's outside the borders of Eretz Yisrael is tummy. It is ritually defiled. You leave the borders of Eretz Yisrael, you are now in ritually defiled territory. What implications does that have? It has implications for a Kohen. Let's start with a Kohen. Can a Kohen leave Eretz Yisrael? It's Tomei Midrabanan. It's rabbinically Tomei in Chutz La'aretz. Now, when I say rabbinically Tomei in Chutz La'aretz, Chazal didn't really care about what you're going to tell them about Chutz La'aretz. Yeah, but it's the biggest base medrash in the world. There's 8,000 boys learning there in the middle of a city in America. But it goes through Tumal Eretz Ha'amim. It's something. It's not Lublin talking. I can't do anything about it. We're going to learn in a Mishnah now. Second issue, which will be the subject of this Mishnah. And when can a Kohen leave Eretz Yisrael? It's a sugya. It's a sugya. Okay. We have a question. Is there a handout today? Was it sent out? I got it out this morning. I don't know if it was distributed. I'm looking at a Mishnah in Nazir Perek Gimel, Mishnah Vav. Nazir Perek Gimel, Mishnah Vav. And there's a tumah in the Eretz Ha'amim. Can a Kohen go to Eretz Ha'amim? It's rabbinically tamei. There are times where a Kohen can go into Chutz La'aretz. Wonderful. Rabbi Dr. Samit shared the file with the meeting. So here we go. It's a sugya. The Gemara talks about it in Avodah Zarah Daf Yud Gimel. The second issue, a Nazir, which doesn't come up in this week's Parsha. Nazir is in Parshas Noso, but a Nazir takes a vow of Nazirus. And this week's Parsha, Parshas Matos, begins with the laws of vows and oaths. And many halachas of Nazirus are learned from this week's Parsha, and many halachas of Nedarim and Shavuos are learned from Nazirus, because they're both forms of taking an oath. Okay, so we're in Masechta Nazir, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Vav. We have a problem. You have a Yid that lives in Chutz La'aretz, and he said, Hareini Nazir. I'm a Nazir. Well, how are you a Nazir? You can't be a Nazir in Chutz La'aretz. A Nazir can't become Tamid. He can't go into a cemetery. He can't come into contact with a dead body, and he can't be in Chutz La'aretz. A Nazir can't be in Chutz La'aretz. Why can't a Nazir be in Chutz La'aretz? It's Tameh. Again, I'm not making this up. It's a Mishnah. Eretz Ha'amim is Tameh. It don't make a difference where you are in Eretz Ha'amim. It doesn't make a difference where you are. The Boston Rebbe, who was in Ramat Beit Shemesh, the Choin Tzaddik Levracha, once told me that his father, who was a member of the Moetzes Gedolei HaTorah in New York, he lived in New York, where he's a member of the American Moetzes Gedolei HaTorah. He was a big Paisik. And he had his Beis Medrash in Borough Park. And he was invited several times to speak at the Agudas Yisrael convention, the famous convention, the annual convention, wherever it is, November, December. And he decided to speak about Eretz Yisrael in a response to something the Satmar Rav, Zichron Tzaddik Levracha, said about Eretz Yisrael several weeks before the Agudah convention. So whatever speech he gave, he spoke about the Statue of Liberty. Boston Rebbe spoke about the Statue of Liberty. He spoke about different things. And then he made the following comment. He didn't mention, I don't believe he mentioned the Satmar Rav Zatzal. He said as follows. There can always be a question in someone's mind as to where there is more Kedusha, in Tel Aviv or on Bedford Avenue. Now, when we say Bedford Avenue, we think about Bedford Avenue, Avenue I, Avenue J, Avenue K. We all get the mention with the big houses, the fancy houses, Bedford Avenue, Flatbush, yeah. Bedford Avenue, for those who know Brooklyn, Bedford Avenue continues going down and enters Williamsburg. Enters Williamsburg, Satmar, Bedford Avenue. The Boston Rebbe Zatzal, the Boston Rebbe's father, said, there can always be a question in your mind whether there's more Kedusha in Tel Aviv or more Kedusha on Bedford Avenue. But the way I answer the question, said the Boston Rebbe, is simple. I think about a stalk of wheat. And I think about the stalk of wheat growing in the middle of a movie theater in Tel Aviv. And then I think about the same stalk of wheat growing in the middle of the biggest Beis Medrash on Bedford Avenue. And I come up with a pure halachic conclusion. The stalk of wheat that's growing in the movie theater in Tel Aviv, you have to take off Truma and Maaseh from it. The stalk of Tvua that's growing in the middle of the biggest Beis Medrash on Bedford Avenue has no mitzvah of Trumas and Maaseh. And that, the Boston Rebbe said, tells me a little something about the Kedusha of Tel Aviv versus the Kedusha of Bedford Avenue. That's inescapable. There's a Kedusha to the inherent land in Eretz Yisrael, and there's a Tumah to the inherent land in Chutz La'aretz. So here the Mishnah in Perek Gimel, Nazir Perek Gimel Mishnah Vav, says, Mi she'nozir naziris harbe. A Yid lives in Chutz La'aretz, and he accepted upon himself multiple naziris. He said, I'm going to be a nazir for 30 days. And then he said, I'm going to be a nazir for a year. And he said, I'm going to be a nazir for another 30 days. And he kept on making naziris, and he was showing me his naziris. Didn't drink wine, didn't shave his head, didn't cut his hair, didn't go to didn't drink wine, didn't go to a cemetery, didn't take a haircut. Perfect. For Hishlam is Nazirus, he finished all the days of the Nazirus. And then he travels to Eretz Yisrael. Beishamai says he has to be a Nazir, irrespective of how much time he was supposed to be Nazir. In other words, let's say in Chutz La'aretz he said, I'm going to be a Nazir for a year. He finished his year. He comes to Eretz Yisrael. Beishamai says he has to be a Nazir for 30 days because he doesn't get credit for Nazirus in Chutz La'aretz, because in Chutz La'aretz he was Tameh. It was Nazirus with a rabbinical tumah. Beis Hill oimim Nazir b'tchil. And Beis Hill says the person is a Nazir from the beginning. So if he lived in Chutz La'aretz and he accepted upon himself to be a Nazir for a year and a half, he comes to Eretz Yisrael. Beis Shammai says he needs to be a Nazir for 30 days. Beis Hillel says, no, he needs to be a Nazir for a year and a half. He gets no credit, zero credit for what he did in Chutz La'aretz because he was a Nazir in a rabbinically Tomei place. And the Mishnah quotes a Maisa with Hilni Hamalk. If you take a look in your Tosfos Yontif on your right side of the page, I believe I underlined the lines for the handout. Three lines down in the Tosfos Yontif, he first quotes a Rambam, that the Rambam paskins like this. Because of a Kesef Mishnah, the Kesef Mishnah on the Rambam writes, the taima, the reason for this halacha, where the Nazir comes to Eretz Yisrael and Beis Hillel says you start from scratch, you get no credit for Chutz La'aretz. B'pnei shekol shehu b'chutz la'aretz, anyone who's in Chutz La'aretz, b'chol yom metame ba'aretz ha'amim. Every single day that a Yid is in Chutz La'aretz, he becomes defiled through the very fact that he's in Chutz La'aretz. It's called Tumas Eretz Ha'amim. I didn't say it. You just read it. It's a Mishnah, a Rambam, a Kesef Mishnah. Okay. With that in mind, that's why it's brought down in Kabbalah Svarim that when a Yid has permission to leave Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, he comes back to Chutz La'aretz, he should go to mikveh. When you come back to Chutz La'aretz, you should go to mikveh. Many different reasons brought down in Kabbalah for that, but here you have a halachic reason. You left Eretz Yisrael, you went to a ritually defiled place. You may have gone to the biggest kollel in the world in Chutz La'aretz. You come back, you're ritually defiled from Eretz Ha'amim. That's a gzeira d'Rabbanan, the rabbinic gzeira of our holy Chazal that we study every day in Gemara. They made a takana that Eretz Ha'amim is Tomei. And every day that you're there, person is defiling himself with Tumas Eretz Ha'am. The second handout comes from the Sefer of Iyunei Aya, studying Rav Kook by the Parsha, and it's written by Rav Gil Devere. And we've used the Sefer several times before. The page is from Parshas Massei, and the pasuk is the pasuk we just quoted in the Ramban. V'horashtem es ha'oretz v'shavtem bo, ki lachem nosati es ha'oretz l'reshes osim. The pasuk that Nachmanides quotes as the chiyuv, the oraisa, the biblical requirement, yes, that's the Ramban, that a person has to conquer Eretz Yisrael, the nation of Israel has to conquer Eretz Yisrael and live in Eretz Yisrael. And on this, Rav Kook wrote the following, but first we need to see a Gemara in Shabbos. HaGemara misaperes al hayom shebo higiu Rav Migdolei HaMarorim LeBavel. The Gemara tells us a story of Rav, the great Rav. The great Rav is almost a Tana. The Gemara says in places, Rav Tana hu Upalik. Rav has the power of a Tana and can disagree with that which is said in a Mishnah. He's not just an Amora. He's almost a Tana. He can actually have a disagreement with a Tana. He lived just at that time of transitioning between Tanoim and Amoraim. We know Rav from the Gemara as Rav disagreeing with Shmuel, Shmuel disagreeing with Rav. That's usually the combination, Rav and Shmuel. Rav started his life in Eretz Yisrael and then had to go to Babel. So the Gemara says that Kodem Lachein Hiskor Rav Eretz Yisrael Shom Lama Mipi Rav Yehuda Hanasi. Rav was a student of Rav Yehuda Hanasi, the author of the Mishnah. Shehigia leBavel Bikshom Maroy and Shmuel V'Kana LeTahot Al Kankano. Tahot Al Kankano is an idiomatic phrase. It means they wanted to check him out. They heard about this great Rav, that's his name, Rav. That's what we call him, Rav. They heard about him, and he's the greatest student of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. They wanted to check him out. Let's see who this person is. How much does he really know? After all, we're Babylonians. I'm not making this up. This is a Gemara in Yuma. There wasn't always pleasantries between the Gedolim in Bavel and the Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael. So Shmuel and Karna live in Bavel, and they hear the news. Rav is coming to Bavel, the great son Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Let's check him out. Let's see what he knows. Shachel is Karna. So Shmuel sent Karna to go talk to Rav and check him out. Let's see how much he knows. The Karna Sholas Rav Sholas She'eis. And Karna decided he was going to ask Rav 3 halachic questions. And with these halachic questions, he'll be able to report back to Shmuel, is Rav really what they make him out to be? This is a Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Kufches Amud Aleph. We're only going to do part of the Rav Kook. It's a much longer piece of Rav Kook and continues further. We're only doing this. There are 3 questions that Karna asked Rav. 3 of those, all 3 questions Rav answered. Rav Kook analyzes each of these questions. Why did Karna? There's a world of halachas that you can pick to discuss with Rav to check him out. Why were these 3 particular halachas picked by Karna to check out Rav? We're only going to deal with one. We're going to see the 3 questions, but we're only going to look at one answer. The Gemara says as follows: Ashkechela Rav, Karna found Rav, Amalei, and Karna said to Rav, Minayin shein kaisven tefillin el al gabi or behema tahira. How do you know, and do you know, is it permissible? Not permissible. You want to write your tefillin. Does the parchment of the tefillin have to be from the hide of an animal that's kosher, a behema tahira? Can you take the hide of a donkey, a mule, the hide of a camel, and write your tefillin on it? Or does the hide have to be from a cow, from a goat, from a calf? Does it have to be from a kosher animal? And if it does, where do you know this from? Minayin shein kosher tefillin elagabi or behema tahir. Amaloi. So Rav answered back, Dechsiv, it's a pasuk in the Torah. Lamantia Torahs Hashem b'ficha. When the Rebbeinu Shalom commanded us in Parshas Bo to wear tefillin, he said, put tefillin on your hand, put tefillin on your head, Lamantia Torahs Hashem b'ficha, so that God's Torah will always be in your mouth. You'll always be talking about Torah. The tefillin will remind you that you have to always be learning Torah. But it says, Torahs Hashem b'ficha. The tefillin remind you that Hashem's Torah should be in your mouth. What are you allowed to put into your mouth? Only kosher animals. Therefore, the tefillin have to be written on the parchment of a kosher animal. You're only allowed to write tefillin on parchment from an animal that you can put in your mouth. That's the question and answer we're going to focus on. The other 2 questions are minayin ledam shehu edai. How do you know that dam nida has to be red? There are all kinds of colors dam, and there's all kinds of nesechta nida, what dam is tameh, what dam is tar. But basically, how do you know when the Torah talks about dam of a nida that it's red? The Torah says dam, and dam can be other colors. Shanemar, so Rav answered him, the pasuk says, Vayiru Moab mineget et hamayim adomim kedam. It's a pasuk, it says that Moab saw the water, and the water was red like blood. So from there, Rav deduces that the normal color of blood is red. Minayin lamila sheva oisei malkim. Karna's 3rd question is, how do you know the mitzvah bris milah is to remove the foreskin? Maybe the bris milah is to do something else. How do you know what part of the body you do a bris milah on? Nemakano losei v'nemala halano losei malahalan dovish oisei afkan dovish. He gave him a drasha. How do you know what organ of the body to do the bris milah on? Those are 3 questions. Those are 3 answers. Now, obviously, we all know there's a lot of. If you want to pick 3 questions, you can ask, how do you know you have to eat a kazayas matzah? How do you know the word pri hadar in the Torah means an esrig? You can pick anything you want. Karna, for some reason, to check out Rav, picked these three halachas. Why did he pick these three halachas? What were they checking for? In other words, they want to check out who this Rav is, but they're checking for something. What are they checking for? If they're just checking to see if he really knows Torah, they can pick anything. But if Shmuel and Kana have a specific thing they're checking for, and we can figure out what they're checking for, then maybe these questions are checking up on a particular point about Rav. We're not just checking to see if he's a massive Talmud Chacham. We want to check if he's a massive Talmud Chacham. We can ask him, like I had someone in my house yesterday, and he said that his fifth grader got a riddle from his Rebbe, and no one's able to figure it out, and his son wants to figure it out desperately and send the answer. What's the riddle? The riddle is, how is it possible to eat something and then have to make 20 brachas after you eat this thing? So he asked me this riddle. We talked about the riddle, we came to the answer. You have a riddle. Now, you can test Rav, you can say to Rav, how is it possible that you can eat something and have to make 20 brachas afterwards? There are so many things you can ask. If you want to just see if Rav is a real Talmud Chacham, there's a world of questions you can ask there. Why are you asking about whether tefillin needs parchment from a kosher animal, what color is dam nida, and what organ do you do bris milah on? Unless you're checking for something very specific about Rav, and these three questions would tell you this specific thing about Rav. And that's what Rav Kook's going to explain. They were, in fact, not checking to see if he was a Talmud Chacham. He was the star Talmud of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. They know he's a Talmud Chacham. There's no question about that. But this is a Talmud Chacham who left Eretz Yisrael and came to Bavel. And they want to check out why he came to Bavel. Why did a Talmud Chacham leave Eretz Yisrael to come to Bavel? That's the question. That's what's in the minds of Shmuel and Karna. Why did Rav leave Eretz Yisrael? And these are the three questions that they ask him, because based upon the answers he's going to give them, they're going to understand why he left Eretz Yisrael. They're going to understand whether he understands Eretz Yisrael. And it's going to have to do with the Mishnah we just learned in Nazir about Tumas Eretz Ha'am. Let's now go to page 189. Harav Kook Masbir Sheshmuel v'Karna Bikshu Lifkon Esibas Haga'oso Sharav Labavel. Rav Kook explains that Shmuel and Karna were not trying to figure out, is Rav a Talmud Chacham? That's ridiculous. He's the star Talmud of Yehuda Hanassi. That's checking a specific thing. We have this massive Talmud Chacham tzaddik who left Eretz Yisrael to come to Bavel. Let's see, we need to check this out. Al yedei hash'elas ha'elohim badku im chalila einhu makib b'malosei shel Eretz Yisrael. So these three questions, they want to check to see if Rav left Eretz Yisrael because he really doesn't think Eretz Yisrael is that important altogether. He lived in Eretz Yisrael, and he learned as much as he could from Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. He's a massive Talmud Chacham, and he's coming to Bavel to open a yeshiva. In open a yeshiva, it's not that important to be in Eretz Yisrael. Whatever Torah I learned in Eretz Yisrael, I can learn in Bavel. The tzitzis that I wore in Eretz Yisrael, I can wear in Bavel. What we talked about yesterday when we learned the Ramban in Achrei Mos. What's the big deal? I learned a lot of Torah. I had a great Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. I learned everything I can. I'm going to go to Bavel. I'm going to go to America. I'm going to open a yeshiva now. I learned in Eretz Yisrael for 20 years. I know a Velt, and now it's time to go to America to open a kollel. Is that why Rav came to Bavel? Because he, mamish, doesn't understand the chashivas of Eretz Yisrael? Or was there a different reason he came? Maybe there's another reason. There's a personal reason. He has a halachic reason that he came to Bavel. Well, let's figure this out. And now we're going to ask him three questions. And depending upon what his answer is, we're going to know if he understands how important Eretz Yisrael is. Each one of these questions and every answer to the question will explain to Shmuel and Karna where Rav is in understanding Eretz Yisrael. With every answer to the three questions that Rav gave, he demonstrated that he loves Eretz Yisrael, that he has a tremendous chashivas for Eretz Yisrael, that he would never leave Eretz Yisrael. And the fact that he's now in Bavel has a halachic permissible reason that he needs to be in Bavel right now, otherwise he would have never left Eretz Yisrael. The first question is, are you allowed to write tefillin on parchment of an animal that's tameh? Now think in your mind to an analogy to that. I want to do something holy. I want to write tefillin. I want to write the Parshas of tefillin. Shema, V'hoyim Shemoah, Kadesh, Moed Kviyacha. I'm going to write holy biblical verses. In order to do a holy biblical mitzvah of tefillin, it's just a little technical issue here. I want to write it on parchment that's tameh. What does that sound like? I want to wear my tzitzis. I want to eat my matzah. I want to learn my Torah, all these holy things, a little technical issue. I want to do it on tameh ground. I want to do it in Eretz Ha'amim. Writing the holy Torah, writing the holy tefillin on parchment, the holy psukim, writing these holy psukim on parchment that's tameh is analogous to studying the holy Torah on a piece of land that's tameh. This is Rav Kook's brilliance. This is what they're looking for. And so he explains, the Yechidei Skula, the real chosen people in Bavel, the great tzaddikim in Bavel, they were connected to Eretz Yisrael with their whole heart. They always wanted to show their true understanding, love, devotion to Eretz Yisrael. The end of the day, the place where Jewish people have to live is Eretz Yisrael. V'hagolus, exile, ha'adoma hatmeya, that ritually impure ground. Now, I introduced the Mishnah in Nazir so that people would not have to think that I'm talking about an Agadita. And to mention yesterday, going back to yesterday, we had somebody raised a question about how the Ramban fits in with the Satmarov, Sholish Shavuos, and Masechta Ksubas. The Sholish Shavuos and Masechta Ksubas, as I mentioned yesterday, is a piece of Agadita. It's nice Agadita. It's very difficult to flip Agadita into a halachic statement. Agadita is Agadita. It has unbelievable lessons to it. It's the holy words of Chazal. But we don't take an Agadita and say, well, this is the halacha. This morning, we read a Mishnah in Nazir, a Rambam and a Kesef Mishnah. Tumah in Eretz Ha'amim is a halacha. The Nazir is ritually defiled while he's in Chutz La'aretz. That's not an Agadita. That's a halacha. Mochrachas hi liyos pregemes es or hakodesh al haTorah v'chol hamaylas haruchnis al yoinish shebchval ha'umah. The fact that you're in exile and there's tumah in Eretz Ha'amim, you can believe it or not believe it. Tumah, you can't taste it. You can't smell it. You can't touch it. When a person enters a house, with a dead body in it, he didn't touch the body. But now if that person leaves his house and walks into the Beis HaMikdash, he's chayav misa, he's chayav heavenly death. What did he do? He didn't touch anything. The Rebbeinu Shalom says that there's such a thing as spiritual defilement in the world. I give the mashal many times. The people who suffered Chernobyl, or before that, the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they were miles away from the explosion. You can't smell it. You can't touch it. It's radiation, but it does tremendous damage. It does tremendous physical damage. The fact that you can't touch, hear, or see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And in the spiritual world, there's such a thing called spiritual radioactivity, and that's tumor. You're in the house with the loyalin or a dead person, you walk out, you go in the base Hamikdash, you have heavenly death, but I didn't do anything, I didn't touch anything. Yeah, you're ritually defiled. But I can't see it, I can't touch it. Yeah, but radioactivity can also kill you, chas v'shalom. So Rav Kook said, you need to understand that when you're in Chutz La'aretz, Chazal say there's a tumah in Eretz Ha'amim. And to say that it doesn't affect you means you don't believe Chazal. If you live in Eretz Ha'amim and say, I understand I live in a ritually defiled place, but I have this halachic permission to be here, or circumstances to be here, say that. But if you're going to say that there's no tumah in Eretz Ha'amim, and it's a perfectly pure place, and it's the same thing like Eretz Yisrael, then you are denying Chazal. You do not believe in the words of Chazal. I had a conversation, I had to be up late last night to do some legal work. And I have a friend that does bankruptcy work in America, and I needed to talk to him on behalf of a client about what he should do in the case of a possible liquidation. So I called him about 12 o'clock at night here, 5 o'clock in America. I know that usually that time he has a little time to talk. So we exchanged pleasantries. How are you doing? How am I doing? What's doing Corona? What's doing Corona here, Corona there? He has children to live in Eretz Yisrael. And I asked him the legal question. He gave me the answer. And then I said to him, no, when are you moving here? Your children are here. When are you moving here? So he said to me, I need to be honest with you, Aaron. Myself, as almost all Jews that are still in America, except the ones that have gotten the message, I still haven't gotten the message completely, but we're waiting for a pogrom. When there's finally a pogrom, I know I'm going to have to leave, but I can't bring myself to leave before that pogrom. The shooting in the Pittsburgh Conservative or Reform Temple began to alert me that a pogrom is possible in America. The fact that a gunman can go shoot up a shul, it's something that never happened in America. That began to make me think about pogrom in America. They can shoot up a shul in America. And that started to make me think about maybe I need to move to Eretz Yisrael. But I talked to my friends. Most of us are just unfortunately waiting for the big pogrom, and then we're gonna just get out of here. Never, never, never. It's mamash a direct quote from my good friend. You need to understand, forget the pogroms. And I asked Shmuel, and as I say Shmuel's name, it's time to thank Shmuel and Yaakov and Levi again, the work that they put into having this Zoom work day after day, uploading it to the site. Tremendous amount of work, distributing the handout, tremendous amount of work. Yashikar, to Shmuel, Levi, Yaakov, Hashem should give you bracha and hatzlacha. So, the Eretz Ha'amim is coming. For a person to say Eretz Yisrael, when there's no Beis HaMikdash, there's no Beis HaMikdash, so Eretz Yisrael is not different. In order for Eretz Yisrael to be holy, it needs a Beis HaMikdash. Right now, Eretz Yisrael is the same thing as anywhere else. And in fact, there are plenty of places that have big yeshivas and bigger Talmidei Chachamim. I doubt that. But anyway, there are bigger places, bigger Talmidei Chachamim, and therefore it's okay to be here. Then you don't believe Chazal. And if you don't believe Chazal, then you borderline apikaios. Chazal, we just read the halacha. You're in a defiled place. You have a choice. Assuming all the circumstances are present, you have a choice. You can live in Eretz Yisrael, which is ritually pure, or you can live in Chutz La'aretz, which halachically, not agadically, halachically is ritually impure every moment that you're there. And to believe that ritual impureness doesn't affect you is to deny not only Chazal, is to deny God's word. Ritual impurity affects your neshama the same way radioactivity affects your body. And if you don't believe that, then you don't believe in Parshas in the Torah about Tum and Tahara. Then you don't believe you need a Parah Aduma. You don't believe you need a mikvah. What do I need a mikvah for? What happened? I didn't do anything. What do I have to go to a mikvah for? What is Tumah? What is Tumah? These are fundamental beliefs of Yiddishkeit, Tum and Tahara. And they're fundamental because it's a trust in God. We don't see these things, and yet God says, I'm telling you it's happening. You are tamei, you are radioactive spiritually. It shows that we believe God when we're makayim the mitzvahs of Tum and Tahara. Not to believe in these mitzvahs means not to believe in God. There's a Tum in Eretz Ha'am. And the same way Eretz Yisrael brings a purity to the neshama, Chutz La'aretz, no matter what you're going to do there, on the highest level, is going to have a sense, a level of impurity. The greatest indication of this is the example that Rav gave them. Rav said, yes, the tefillin have to be written on the skin of a behema tahira. You cannot take holy letters and write them on top of skin that came from a behema tameya. You can't do it. You're not Makayim Mitzvah's tefillin. And you can't take those holy letters and study them on ground that is ritually impure. Now, of course, there are people in Chutz La'aretz. We understand there are heterim in Chutz La'aretz, there are reasons for alakut zaken. But people need to understand. And that's what they were testing here. Shmuel and Karna were testing Rav. What do you think of writing tefillin on the hide? It's no difference. Hide is hide. Camel hide, donkey hide, cow hide. One may be more expensive, one may be less expensive. But in terms of hide, it's hide. You take the same holy letters and just write it on the hide. No. It depends where you're writing the holy letters on, and it depends the same degree where you're studying the holy letters on. And therefore, by Rav saying, no, you cannot write holy letters on impure parchment, and the pasuk is L'mantia Toras Hashem b'ficha min amota b'ficha. That was an indication to Karen and Shmuel that he understands this concept. Letters, as holy as they are, can't be written on parchment that's tameh. He's got it. And he understands that you can't study Torah on ground that's tameh. And he must have come to Bavel for some reason, not because he dismisses Eretz Yisrael as unimportant. And so Rav Kook goes on to the other two questions. Karna and Shmuel picked these questions to figure out who, not that Rav is a Talmud Chacham, let's forget about it, to figure out why did Rav come to Bavel? Is he one of these people that left Eretz Yisrael because it's not a big deal? But he come to Chutz La'aretz because there's a reason he needs to be in Chutz La'aretz. And by asking the question about tefillin on a behema tameya, and the answer he gave them, that means his mind is working properly. The holiest letters can't be on parchment that's tameh, and those holy letters cannot be learned on ground that's tameh. And if Rav is in Bavel, it means he has a halachically permissible purpose. I'll end with an interesting Dvart, I guess, that Rav Kook said. You're talking Rav Kook was nifter in, I believe, 1935. Believe? 1935. So there's no Medina yet. But there were the Chalutzim, there were the settlers coming, and many of the settlers, Rav Kook had to deal with this constantly, the issue of Shemitah, the issue of all the issues of Shmira Torah mitzvahs for people who were secular. And Rav Kook wrote much about it and worked with these people. Somebody asked Rav Kook, if Eretz Yisrael is such a holy place and sends out these rays of spiritual holiness, and Eretz Ha'amin, Chutz La'aretz, is Tameh, so tell me, how is it that so many Jews come to Eretz Yisrael and remain secular? What happens to all these spiritual rays going out? Why aren't they becoming more Torah observant? So Rav Kook said the following. He said, I know there's a place in America. Rav Kook was probably talking about some place like Arizona. He said, I know there's a place in America where people who have trouble breathing go there. He's probably talking about people that have all these different breathing problems. and they're sent, I believe, to live in Tucson, Arizona, where there's a different kind of air. So Rav Kook said, I heard that there's a place in America where they send people with severe breathing problems to live. Now, if I were walking through the streets of this place and I saw all these people and all of them are coughing and all of them are wheezing, not knowing anything, I would say, wow, this is a very bad place to live. Everybody around here is coughing, wheezing. The air in this place is very bad. Everybody is sick here. But the truth of the matter is, the reason why there are so many sick people wheezing and coughing in Tucson, Arizona is because they've come there to heal themselves and get rid of the wheezing and get rid of the coughing. But not knowing anything, I would think that Tucson, Arizona is a place where people get sick. I wouldn't understand it's a place where people can actually get well. And he said the same thing is true for Eretz Yisrael. If you look at Eretz Yisrael without knowing all the facts and everything that's going on, then you say this is a place where people get spiritually sick. Look at all the secularism. Look at all these secular Jews. What is going on here? I'm going to Chutz La'aretz. But that's because you don't understand what's going on here. They're here. And whether you know it or not, they are being healed openly. They're being healed b'nister. However they're being healed, there's something going on here in Eretz Yisrael. And so if you look around, you say, this is a place where people get sick, but it's not. There's so many sick people here. It's because this is the place where the neshama brought them here to get healed, whether the neshama knows it or not. To understand the Hashivas of Eretz Yisrael, a beautiful Rav Kook about what Shmuel and Karna were trying to figure out about our holy Rav. All Yidden need Yeshua Shav Yeshuas, all Yidden need Refuah Shav Refuas, all Yidden need Nechama Shav Nechamas, all Yidden need Brach get the brachas, the Yeshuas Nechamas Refuas come from the Rebbeinu Shalom. He's the Echad Yochel Miyuchad. He has many shluchim to bring these brachas to us, but at the end, they all come from him when he wants to send it, how he wants to send it. We should have the understanding to do that which we could do, take care of ourselves. The outside seems becoming a bit more dangerous each day. Again, the Rosh Hashanah should take away this corona, should make the perfectly imperfect world, that perfect world that we're all learning about. The world that will have the Beis HaMikdash that we built in Midas, the world that will have the Beis HaMikdash that we're learning about the Avodah in Masechet Tamid, with the Gula Shalem from Hera. Everybody have a wonderful Gesund day, and everybody have a wonderful Shabbos Kodesh. Remember, when listen to the Baal Kairi Matos Massei, but when the Baal Kairi says in Parshas Massei, V'hayrashtem es ha'orez v'shavtem ba, think about the fact that you are listening to that pasuk in Eretz Yisrael, and as you're listening to the pasuk, you're actually being Makayim the pasuk. It's a very interesting pasuk. The Baal Kairi can read the pasuk, and you shall eat matzah on Pesach, but you're not eating matzah while you're healing Kriyas HaTorah. The Baal Kairi can read on Sukkot, and you shall shake a lulav, but you're not shaking a lulav during Kriyas HaTorah. The Baal Kairi can read, and you shall sit in a sukkah, which is not sitting in a sukkah during Kriyas HaTorah. But when the Baal Kairi, that's somebody wrote to me, that's assuming we're in Shul this Shabbos. All right, Mi'at Hashem, we're in Shul this Shabbos. If Chashon, we can't be in Shul, we have outdoor minyanim. Outdoor minyanim become a shayla also, or mepeset minyanim, lacking all that. If you read the pasuk this Shabbos, while you're reading the pasuk, you're doing the mitzvah, because while you're reading the pasuk to conquer the land and live in the land, you're in the land. So as you read the pasuk, you're doing the mitzvah, you're mamash learning and doing the mitzvah at the same time. Everybody have a wonderful Shabbos Kodesh.